nobody knows what the model looks like. We're all guessing when we guess the model. There's obviously blacklists, but that doesn't tell you anything really. That tells you if it's on a blacklist. It doesn't tell you what the model is, right? Don't blame people in your company. You want to blame the process. The only competition you're really seeing is yourself, really, in a lot of ways.
Welcome to the Go-to-Market podcast. In this episode, we're joined by Jesse Ouellette from Lead Magic, who is going to share insights on cold email deliverability and the evolving landscape of email outreach. You'll learn about the critical changes in email deliverability as of October 2024, the importance of building a robust monitoring system to prevent inbox burnout, and strategies for effectively reaching enterprise clients using Outlook. Jesse also discusses the significance of using multiple email vendors and the impact of DMARC records on your outreach success. This show is brought to you by LeadBird, a lead generation agency specializing in performance-driven, hyper-personalized cold emails that generate demos and drive growth. Go to leadbird.io to learn more.
What's going on, guys? I got my boy Jesse here from Lead Magic. I've known Jesse for I think 3 years now. We've been on top of a lot of the cold email stuff that you'll see the influencers post because they'll see us talk about it initially.
They steal our stuff, but we don't care. Whatever.
Yeah. I think Jesse is, the way I would describe it is he's definitely a growth hacker. He's had a great background from going from sales leader to kind of deliverability consultant to agency owner, and then now killing it with the SaaS space. And that's stuff we'll talk about as well. But I think the most insightful things I get from Jesse are just all the cold email deliverability, random little nuances that you won't it's just technical stuff, the very, very, very technical things that Jesse's just been able to pinpoint really well. And so whenever I run into issues at LeadBird, I love calling Jesse and being like, hey, did you figure this out? How'd you solve this? And he usually always has an answer. So to go ahead and kick it off, Jesse, a lot of things have changed in the last year on the deliverability front. What do you think are the must-dos as of October 2024 that you need to do to get to the primary?
Yeah, so I think what's really changed is the service, where in the UI UX where the user hits report as spam, they're starting to bring that more to people's attention, right? And that is everybody knows that's the fatal, that's the kill shot for anybody sending cold emails, right? So if you hit report as spam, I mean that's the end of your day, right? You got to go home at that point, right? So you're only allowed really a very small number of those, and that's why, of course, a lot of people are failing now. Is they sort of send annoying messages, right? They're not relevant offers. They're not picking the right audiences. They're picking maybe 50% of the right people and 50% of the ones that aren't. But that is all the impact in the world that you need to be thrown out of the inbox now. And I had said this 4 or 5 years ago when I started really on this journey of B2B email delivery. I started saying hey, everyone's going to be screwed. And I actually was even fired at a company where I said, hey, I'm not going to put on the email signature. And that was the last rodeo I had in SaaS. So I saw it was coming though. I knew it was going to come. I knew you couldn't really just put a bunch of images and a bunch of links and a bunch of, so you're really, it's really the only thing now. People aren't even really taught, I still see some people kicking around oh, here's how you write great email, but that conversation is kind of, now it's more, hey, how do I build an infrastructure that I can actually get these messages out there, make sure they're relevant? And you really can't spam people now, right? The servers are way better, way more, right? They're using a lot of tactics. That obviously they would have with machine learning, cloud computing, AI, right? They're able to really detect a lot of this stuff, and they find it pretty quickly and they block you. So I think what's changed the most is just the fact that now your IT team is part of your sales team now. if you're not from that department.
And what would you say? I think, and it's always funny, right? Because me and you know what's up. I think a lot of the high level guys know what's up when it comes to a lot of the technical stuff.
Yep.
But you always, people the guys that are just getting to the space, they make content about the things that are kind of I would say fundamentals and basics. And so, if we go to the fundamentals, it's no links, no attachments, no open tracking, short, sweet copy that's spin taxed really well. Using providers like Google or Microsoft, not going through resellers, Making it to where it's very low email per inbox and per domain. It's making sure you have like the regular DKIM record set or like the regular record setup, right? That's like the basic fundamentals. Outside of the fundamentals, what are you thinking is like you have to do these kind of
Yeah.
things to make sure you land in
I'll
primary?
tell you what it is, even, and you've probably been humbled by this before too. I would say one of the biggest ones, and I can give an example here of something we just ran into. But the biggest one I would say is setting up consistent monitoring and building your organization for failure. And what I mean by that is before the failure happens, it's better if you just say it's gonna happen, right? Because what
Yeah.
happens is it becomes a blame game, like who didn't do this, and then it just tears apart the team, right? So the way that we take anything into, even in software, I mean, it's a little bit better in software development, but in sort of email, you have to build it the same way. The infrastructure has to be built the same way with failure, right? You have to be thinking about like, hey, what happens if this stuff kind of stops working or this or whatever? And if you don't build the monitoring, if you don't build like all that, you can make some really like just stupid, unforced errors. But you have to build a really good organization, and you've built an amazing agency. And that wasn't my strength, but uh, you know, I would say that you have to basically don't blame people in your company. You want to blame the process. So like when something does go down, right? Like hey, we missed DKIM records on these, 9 domain names, 10 domain names. Like don't blame the actual person who was setting it up. More blame the process because there was obviously you should have had a check there, right? You got to, as an agency owner or founder, you really got to blame yourself and say, hey, we should have had a test case there that's testing it every week. I mean, we email ourselves for every single inbox we have for every week, right? And we know if the records are ever off. There's an alert that's sent
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as well. I think, yeah, to your point, like literally we built the foundation this last week of like how to identify when an inbox is going to get burned before it gets burned, right? Seeing
Yeah.
like that trending effect
Yeah,
of
and you
like
didn't see
every week.
replies, and look,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a gut feel there, but like there really isn't in a lot of ways where it's just like, hey, we started this campaign, it's been 3-4 days, we've sent it to a couple thousand people. Doesn't look like it's hitting. We're not seeing any replies. The replies that are coming in are like harsh, like take me the F off your list. You're, go eat concrete or cinder blocks, like those types of ones, right? But like that's what I'm thinking is really, if you don't see that happening right away, then there's something wrong. Or even the ones that are getting no responses are like just as bad. Like no response now, especially with, I mean, you really couldn't do open tracking. It was really compromised for like a year and a half really before. So people thought they were doing it, but they weren't. So, but anyways, that's sort of the thing. You just have to plan for that. And you have to look at I like to look at the initial, I get a little nervous after that first 1,000 to 1,500 emails. If I don't see at least, some people who read the message clearly in the message, like in their response, it's clear they read the message.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I think like whenever we see a campaign where we're not just seeing, because I think like, and here's the thing, right? Like a lot of the new guys, it's easy to monitor whenever you're just doing a couple of campaigns. When you're doing it for 50 to 100 clients, it
Yeah,
gets a lot harder
that's the
to
hard
identify
part.
the trends. And that's where you got to build a foundation where you're able to like kind of identify these trends.
Yeah, we did a lot of, I
And
mean, for us, it was about, so it was like, first of all, it was like a people thing first, right? You start with like people and you're like, all right, here's the things that you personally are responsible for, right? Very clear goals there, very clear, written down. Everyone knows where it is. And when I say responsible, I mean like, monitoring it, right? And you should use technology though to monitor everything you're doing in your company for that matter, right? Like, I had a good one today where we were, there was like a couple of inboxes we had that were it was an internal campaign, but we were running the campaign and it was still sending, but it was like, we actually had somebody come in LinkedIn and said, hey, your inbox didn't, I tried to reply to buy or whatever they were trying to, and it didn't, every agency owner knows what I'm talking about. They've had something like this. And you basically realized, oh crap, there's something going on. Now it was like one of our tenants and it was not, for some reason, like the card had expired or something like that. And we've all had that happen. And what ended up happening was it was still sending emails, right? even though it
Yeah.
was. Now, I think that's a testament to how great SmartLead is. It's still sending the emails, even though that, but I'm just
Yeah.
surprised that it would still work, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
you know,
That's the thing. It's like Microsoft, when they disable the tenant,
yeah,
they seem not to disable the outgoing SMTP, but like, yeah, your inbound emails, anybody that
you're
replies
done.
just
Yeah.
immediately gets disabled, or like they just get that bounce back, that soft bounce.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
it was like
that's happened
this
a lot.
person got like there was another level of bounce that they got back. And that's it really is like just like that internal campaign, you're like, "Oh man, how many then cuz the worst you
Yeah.
start thinking about the worst, right?"
Yeah. It's like, oh, like this has been running like this for like months at a time. I mean, quite literally, this is maybe like 2 years ago. We had a situation where we had all of our clients in one tenant like an idiot, and it got disabled. And I think we had like maybe like 2 or 3 tenants that we were using at that time. So maybe not all of the clients in there, but we had a huge, like maybe 1,000 plus inboxes, and that one tenant got disabled. And then we didn't recognize this for maybe like a week.
Yeah.
And so now, you can run
It's
systems there
hard.
where
Yeah, it's really hard and
yeah,
uh
you got to kind of figure out the technical way to like figure it out. And the way we figured it out was like, okay, if you do a daily check on the domain for Microsoft inboxes in a tenant, and you can go check to see if the SMTP is connected or not.
yep,
And if it's not connected, it means that the tenant is probably disabled.
right.
And so that's how we're
That's actually how
identifying
you want
that.
to do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
check
yeah.
was
So yeah,
that check is now in place for us. So
yeah. I agree. I think the way it is, it's like, yeah, you have a process, but you should always have some kind of tech on the back end that can verify
mhm.
that, hey, that hit it,
Yep.
or like, identify whenever the trend goes
Yeah, and
down.
if you look at like the best organizations in the world, the ones that have been around, like US Navy, like any of these like really, organizations that have just been reliable, right? Like I mean, the airline industry, things like that. It's just they have a process, and what they do is they look at every single failure and they adopt when something happens. They never go and say, I mean, they might have to eventually, but like if that person really is because it kind of it actually stalls you from getting to the problem. You're better off going to, I mean, look, the person's under stress. They're working at your company. It's probably a fast moving company. Like that's the answer to just about every, they have a life too. So you can't really just go blame and attack the person. You're better off trying to figure out like what happened in a nice way
Yeah.
and be like, oh, cool. So we could just prevent that from happening with this strategy now, right? So how do I get that information? That's the kind of conversation that I'd say top agencies, as you know, and I know you guys do a ton of this, do that, right? Like that's a big, and just testing constant. I mean, we're testing all of our SaaS applications. Every API endpoint I have, we test every single 15 minutes. We're testing it.
Yeah. Oh, to kind of shift the
Yeah.
conversation a little bit, one of the things I think it's very important going into 2025, like this is how I see the landscape for cold email.
Yep.
I think like the best way and the best agencies and just the best people doing it in the space, they're going to have multiple vendors and multiple providers when it comes to email infra. So like going everything from like just regular Outlook, regular Google to Hybrid to MailReef, using a whole variety of vendors on the back end. And then, you use a tool like Lead Magic, for example, to examine the MX records of every
Yep.
lead on your lead list, and then you create the campaign. You're basically adjusting who you're sending to according to the infra that best can inbox in that
Yep.
receiver's inbox.
Yeah,
So
you
wanna
nailed
kinda, like,
that.
talk.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we did I saw really like, we all saw what's happening right now and it's might change. You never know. It changes every day, but we're all seeing like how hard it is right now to get your emails into the Microsoft Office system, right? So I think what we're seeing though, on the other end, I think there's probably a good reason why Google might want your emails actually, because what they like, I think, my guess would be is your interaction with Gemini, right, being inside their platform. I think they probably want you to tune your own spam filter, right, which is a better world for them anyways, right? Spam filters are just as annoying for the email providers themselves because they have to basically deal with the support, right? The support of spam filters is hard, right? They have to predict what you don't want. And when you get something you do, if you miss an email, that's when they have to jump in and that's when it's expensive and IT people have to get involved. So I think Gemini might have a good reason right now. And, if you're looking at it, and that's why what we're seeing is if you're sending valid emails, and I'm not talking about like the famous accept all catch all valid emails, and we find those too, but it's like if you're sending to truly valid emails, the ones that the MX record says this is a valid email, right? So the accept all is controlled at the domain level. What we're seeing is like almost a 4 to 5x reply rate on a similar campaign if you're hitting on Gmail valid emails, because it's obvious why, right? Like you can hit, and when we did the placement testing with Vabav on Smart Lead, we saw it was just a completely dramatic change. Like it was not even close. It was I think it was 10x difference when we saw like compared to Microsoft Office. So, I mean, valid emails on Gmail right now that's today. We could have this interview next week and it'd be a completely different story, but that's where people are sort of seeing a little bit more of success, and getting out to a good start, getting engagement high in the beginning seems to be the most important factor.
Yeah, I agree. I think like inbox burnout is a real
Yep.
thing. And like and then this is why it's so important. Like when you have a client, like you try to make that first campaign be the absolute best,
Yep.
because like the least amount of engagement or the lower amount of engagement you get, the higher chance the inbox gets burnt out.
Yep.
So I guess like I've also thought of like, and I love your opinion on this. I'm like, I guess like kind of gray hat, black hat, like warm up strategies in this sense. So, the campaigns that do really well, no matter what, is like, the ones that you target international companies first. And they just obviously do well because they don't get pitched as often as Americans.
Right.
I think the thing that does really well in terms of getting engagement is like, this is a little bit more on the grayer hat side of things, but like emailing people, pitching them on, hey, I'd love to, or we're currently hiring and we're looking for candidates. We thought you'd be a good fit for the role. Like, would you like to send over your resume or something like that, or would you be interested? Like, everybody's looking for a new job in the market, and it's even more internationally. Like, they are all looking for more jobs,
Yep.
and they're more likely to respond and hear more about it.
This is funny because if you there was another service out there, and I think they had pretty good intentions actually. I actually do like the founder and everything like that. A company called Gated. I don't know if you remember this one. Do you remember these guys?
Yeah. Yep, I do.
So the funniest thing about that whole company was, what they were doing was they would basically, you'd send an email to somebody like a senior level executive who has this Gated on their box, right? And what they would do is they would reply to you with a link and a donation button, right? Now, that to me is like, whoa, I just got to reply. Now it's an engaged domain. And it's it's somebody who's been on that tenant probably since the beginning, or is like, has maybe even like higher level privileges. Like you're now getting an email for somebody who might have a billing account on there, right? Like that's a pretty good person to get the email from. And now you're in. Now you're in. You don't even need, So it's like, I know they unfortunately didn't seem to make it, but that service itself really didn't understand that if you are engaging with people's emails and you're trying to, you kind of don't really win if you go out spam with spam or something. Like I think that's like but that was like an interesting one, just not understanding how the internet works. Like you can't like mess it up. Like it's global, and the reason that it works is it's not owned by one country. Like there's a lot of reasons that were set up of the way that networking and all the internet connectivity and all of the different like even domain resellers or domain companies, registrars, and then obviously IP, the IPv4 and all that. Like understanding that at a fundamental level sort of helps a lot with cold email.
Yeah, no, I agree. What are your thoughts on like how to land inside of like an Outlook inbox? Like, let's say you're emailing like
yeah, so
enterprise, or 80% of your lead list is just Outlook. Like, how would you go about getting those to actually land in those recipients' inboxes?
The ones that we're seeing when we did a bunch of placement tests. Now, I don't love this answer because it doesn't really help. But the ones that we saw that had the highest reply rates on an Outlook system was the ones that okay. So we looked at a couple things. One of them was we looked at if it had like the older domains did better. So the ones that were over a year old. Now that kind of stinks because a lot of your if you take on a new client or you're an agency, you're going to have newer domains. So that might actually bring the, and I know you've talked about this a couple of times, you might want to possibly, set up a system where, you're using more generic domains and you might use that domain again with another client or whatever, right? Like it's your sort of already warmed up or whatever, pre-warmed or whatever you want. That's sort of into that space, right? I don't think people necessarily notice there, but I think the other thing that we noticed with Microsoft Office was we were able to get better replies early, but then it would like fade off really hard, and you just be like, "Oh my god, I'm not getting anything in now." Right? Did you see that? Is that what you saw?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And that's where it got harder. And I think any of the ones that have like security gateways even made it a lot harder. So obviously, like if somebody has Proofpoint, they probably still have Microsoft Office, right? It's not that they don't have Microsoft Office. They have. So that's one thing we've been doing in our platform. We've been giving the DNS records to basically help people. And then we've actually been seeing, there's actually a pretty good thing I'm doing right now. I'm looking at the SPF record and the DMARC record as also indicators, because think about it logically. Like if somebody has like an enterprise DMARC service, like a DMARCian or one of those, a lot of those are going to be more, they're going to be harder to, they're going to have much different kind of policies on their systems internally. So I think that would be another thing, for that. And then I think low volume right now seems to be, you really got to go like, even like 5 to 10 emails, like you got to be very low. And, looking at some of these services like Scaled Mail and, what's the other one? Hypertide? Omar, yeah. Yeah, so like those ones right there, I think there's a couple of these that are out there right now that if you know kind of thing, and that's something that I think you might want to look at. And I think, getting into different groups. I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, if like everybody uses the same platform, we also did a little bit better on Office when we turned off warm up.
Yeah,
slightly better. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't enough, and that was on. We tried it both on Instantly and Smartlead. We try to, I'm trying, obviously, like, I do help Smartlead, full disclosure, I do help Smartlead. I'm an advisor with V, but also like, I like to try to sort of like at least try both platforms just to see if it's ever that. Cause I think generally the user base is pretty close. I think it's the same type of user, right? So I think that's what it is versus like, some of the other tools, that I've seen.
Yeah. And what is like, and I know you mentioned this in one of the group chats we're in. So when you look at like a DMARC record and like they have like jacked or quarantine on there, like how do you kind of think about those and if you should email or not?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is I'm like, all right, so if somebody's doing authentication on their domain, on their email, they're probably, it jumps one more step for me mentally. It's like, if they've got, flattened SPF records, that's probably a dangerous one to go after, because you're probably going to look. I mean, it's not that they're that like cutting innovative, like company that's like doing it. A lot of them are just blocking everything that they don't know. Right. So the first thing you're going to look at a lot of the time is what domain is it, right? That's going to have the most carry on it, right? Like if you think of, and by the way, nobody knows what the model looks like. We're all guessing when we guess the model. I mean, there's obviously blacklist, but that doesn't tell you anything really. That tells you if it's on a blacklist. It doesn't tell you what the model is, right? The model that the companies, the spam filters are using is they don't tell you anything, right? And in fact, they would never tell you anything because they don't want you to abuse it. So I think what you got to look at is you got to look at the model. Like, what would they be looking for? So DMARC records, there's obviously there's enterprise DMARC companies. So I think if you're thinking about it in your own way, you probably want to target companies that don't have as, they're using their own domain as a DMARC record. And they're using none or reject. I'm sorry, none or quarantine, not reject. So if they're using reject, they probably have a pretty stiff policy.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, that's smart.
There's also another one. There's another setting, and I'm still aggregating. There's a lot of data here that I have to go through before I even tell people something, because I test. I don't want to ever, and I never will. So like if I say it, I have a lot already behind like the testing and the methodology, and I've tested it at like a pretty high volume, so I already know, like, you know what I mean. Like I don't. I don't throw it out there if like I haven't tested it, and I would love for someone to challenge one of them, and then let's see what happens, because it would be a bad day for them, I think. So you know, like, and I don't go out there if I really just don't believe it. But I think anybody who has like a strict SPF record on, a stricter enterprise DMARC is going to be a problem. And then the bigger companies, obviously ones that have sensitive sort of like financial services or like, you know, insurance or like those types, or like your sort of like government, you know, you're gonna have a harder time. They're just going to block everything. I mean, it's the ones who have very high investments in cybersecurity and like pen testing and those types of things. Those companies are going to have a much different profile. The local businesses are going to be a lot less, right? Like those ones are, I mean, you could probably even get a reply on a role-based email on those, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, you
Um,
know, and I'm not saying you can just change your ICP overnight, right? I'm not telling you to do that, but I'm saying if you're an agency and you're trying to figure out who the hell to take on as a client, you know, it might be a good idea to validate, like, you know, try just put 100 of the target companies through our validation of like, you know, an email, or find an email there, and then just go let yourself, you know, see what it does. I mean, you probably want to check and see, because if you find out they're all on security gateways, they're all on like, you know, Proofpoint or something like that, it's probably not. I don't think email is the best strategy for you. You might want to make some calls, you know, if that's what you're into, and then, or you might want to do some more like, you know, LinkedIn prospecting and that type of stuff.
yeah, and that kind of takes me to my next point.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think of LinkedIn outreach right now?
So, you know, I'll just disclaimer it, because obviously, like, I have a good relationship with LinkedIn, but I don't do anything like automation on my own account or anything like that ever, because you can always get, they have a lot of people in their abuse team and everything. But you know, I think LinkedIn does work very well for prospecting, because you know, but you only get a certain amount of connections a week, right? So you're limited to that. And, you know, let's say 25 days a month, you might get you know, 35 to 40 connections a day. Like at, you know, there used to be a way to kind of go over that, like 500, but those are the old days. But you know, the big thing is really just getting the connections, but then making the curiosity gap so high on the profile. Like don't put any messages in there. Don't do anything. Like make sure they're coming to your profile to try to figure out what your company does.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think um, like how I see the landscape changing, right? So if you kind of think about it, 5 years ago, or not even five, like really like 3 years ago, it was super easy to spam LinkedIn. You had, you know, high sending limits. You know, you could load things up, you can run it for super cheap and send out a ton of messages for super cheap.
Yep.
Now they've made it so much harder to send messages. You don't even want to risk your own profile.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not
and
worth it
it's
for your own. If your own, yeah, you
yeah,
know, if it's one of your salespeople,
and they
I don't know, or it's like your whatever your market, I don't know, whoever it is, but um,
they they've limited everything on there a lot, and it's the reverse for cold email. Like cold email used to be expensive, it used to be harder. Then you had tools like Smartly and Instantly that just revolutionized the game, made the cost to actually send cold emails way cheaper for the average person. And now, you know, you're starting to see it get it tighter over there. I think LinkedIn is going to make a huge comeback for agencies in 2025
yep,
versus cold
they
email.
are.
Just
I'll just tell you, like on LinkedIn, like they are exceptional at detecting automation on there, right? From all angles, and I've looked. Obviously, I'm, you know, I have to be an expert in these areas. This is my profession, and you know, obviously, I would tell LinkedIn that, right? Like, and when I look at like what they're doing, I mean, you know, first of all, browser-based automation, right? Not that, you know, you'd be crazy to do any browser-based automation. Like, what I'm talking about is a plugin, right? And what people don't
yeah,
understand from plugins is they can actually see everything in your browser. They're very dangerous to install, right? Like and it's privileged at a certain level. And Google did not have a good handle on this. They're starting to get a little bit better, but most of those browser plugins are completely compromised on all levels. And it is extreme. Like they can detect every single browser plugin that you're running on LinkedIn.
yeah.
So if you're running
I
if you have any browser plugin, they know exactly which browser plugin, and it's very easy to do. It's not hard at all. They just basically they send you a list in your browser. Like you don't know where it is, but it's in your network traffic. They send you a list of all of the all of the extensions that they view as dangerous for their platform, like sort of, and it's $1 billion revenue a year, right? Sales Navigator, that just it's their, that's their bread and butter, right? So like people that go after that, it's a little bit ridiculous. Like, they're gonna fire back, right? Just there. And that's why, like, I just laugh people. And then there's the other group of people that uses tools like, they'll use like a tax hour, like a Phantom Buster. And I think that's okay, fine, that works. But it's like, if you don't know what you're doing there, you could, I mean, one time you're done. I mean, they could like,
Yeah.
and then you're like in
It's not
jail and you're calling around.
Yeah, and like if you're selling in B2B, it's definitely not worth it. Like, I think, when you're doing any kind of cold prospecting, the bridge you're trying to gap is that trust bridge. And so it's like,
Yes.
if I look you up and I can't find you on LinkedIn, to me that's like, oh, this person might not even exist. And then it's like,
Yeah.
risking your account to do anything, probably not the best idea. So try to find the workarounds around that. We're not gonna really mention how that happens,
Yep.
but yeah, try to the workaround around that.
And the other thing
Um,
that's happening there that's interesting and an interesting kind of topical is if you look at what happened recently, there's been a couple of interesting ones. I don't know if people know about this, but you look at like and I think this is, I actually don't, I'm not like, they're a competitor of ours, but like I still don't, this isn't, I don't love this situation either. Like I think it's kind of, they've built a pretty good product and maybe there should have been another warning, but they're actually removing companies that are doing it. So like their biggest asset is obviously like you being on a social network that you can, network with business professionals, but what they do is they end up taking that from you. So if you look at Prospeo recently had a little bit of a problem because they had a plugin, I think that was scraping LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? And so they've removed the founders of Prospeo and they've removed the company off of LinkedIn. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of tools that are scraping LinkedIn, right? Like that are doing different, things that are, at the same time, it's just one of those things. And I watch that and I'm like, oh, wow, this is interesting. But I don't know if you knew that, but that is just like kind of a crazy situation where they're, that's their target move. And it just shows how valuable that platform is for distributing content to people in business. So be careful there.
Yeah, easily. I'm excited to kind of talk about like what you've done on like Lead Magic specifically, right? So like,
Yeah.
for everyone, like, I'll kind of give you a quick glimpse of like how Lead Magic has kind of transitioned and like where it's at now. And it's exciting to see because I see it being mentioned way more now
Mm-hmm.
than when I knew you. Yeah. So when you first started, you were doing company enrichment,
Yep.
and then you're kind of like the agency on the side, kind of under the same umbrella and brand. And then you kind of, I think earlier last year, you transitioned a little bit more into like the SaaS and the do it yourself model where you're kind of supporting a lot of agencies to pull in like client reporting and just kind of being on top of Smart Lead. And now it's starting to become a full-time like email verifier, email finding tool.
Yep.
And to kind of give you your praise, it's, world class.
Thank you.
It's finding most tools, it's verifying emails than most tools and actually coming back with accurate data. And so you want to kind of talk about
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
how you
So, I
started
mean, I
it?
was getting a little frustrated. What was happening was we were kind of split between two different things. I said, I got to either go one way or the other. And I decided to go so all in really on the SaaS product really. But I also realized the one that I was doing when I was challenged a little bit. I couldn't get the value. And look, I think there's people that have done it even better than me since then. But like, I couldn't get the value proposition over people where it was like, all right, we know who's on the site, but it's anonymous and like that. Now we were doing account level, and I don't even want to get into like account versus identity level. Like it's not really a big. It's sort of. I almost get like a popsicle headache whenever I think about it. But what I realized is I just needed to start, and we launched the new platform like kind of like to monthly subscribers in February. And what happened was I said, you know what? I'm just going to go in. I'm going to help people with Smart Lead, which is what I'm good at. I'm going to help that. I'm going to build a WhatsApp group that people come into and get information. And then I'm going to do email validation, right? And I'm just going to try to do it as well as I can do it and just see what happens. That started to go really well. We started to see a pretty good increase in subscribers. Obviously, I had a little bit of an audience, so it was a pretty good natural there. Wasn't going to pay all the bills. But then what happened was, we started to realize, wow, it could though, if I do it a certain way. So we just made it incredibly useful. We let people kind of do their Smart Lead. We had some like things in there to help get this data in your campaign. Then we got to email finding. There was already a lot of vendors that do this. I started to see some trends where I got really good at building APIs, right? Like API development, API gateways, sort of that type of thing. And I realized how to do it a lot less for a lot lower and a lot better. And that's when Clay started to hit. So we got pretty fortunate there. We got into the Clay App Store. They were nice enough to let us in, but we were in 12th place on their waterfall, which is quite a ways from the top, right? And then they redid the math and they realized, wow, this is probably the best, one of the top 2-3 tools in this platform, and they put us at number 2. And I still think we're the number 1, but we're also half the price. But I don't want to go there. But and I think it's one of those things, like they've realized that, and that, they've been an amazing partner. We've been really happy with them. And then also I've just been continuing my relationship with SmartLead and V. Obviously, we both know him pretty well, and just really trying to help people more than anything, really. And then we've done a lot of different things, like, hey, how do you enrich a LinkedIn address to like a business address, social media address to an email, or a personal email to something else, like sort of that. But we do it with compliance involved and things like that. And we're getting into these kind of Clay ecosystems. And look, I'm just, I keep my cost. Look, we have to compete against companies that have raised countless, it's like 40-50 million dollars. And I'm just like, man, if I even had like, one or two engineers extra, like but I could get that, right? Like, it wasn't going to be hard to raise, but I wanted to try to do it this way. I worked at a lot of companies that I didn't really love the culture of. It didn't work for me very well in my profession. I didn't want to build that type of company. And fortunately, we were able to get out of the gate pretty quickly. I think it was a lot of like just helping people, really, making good relationships, getting on, events like this, and helping people in the pavilion and the different communities that I was in, and just help. I just said, I can't take anything here. I got to just help. And it worked in that sense. And, we're doing very well, really, like, in, Baremetrics and Stripe and all of them put us in like the 1% of growth in their platforms. And, it's kind of a cool chart to look at every day. And I'm pretty happy with it. And we're really all in on that now. So
yeah, no, it's exciting to see. And I'm curious, how do you think about going to market for like a PLG SaaS, like Lead Magic?
Yeah, I think, well, look, I think, first of all, when we send emails, it works still, because how good we are at like keeping the costs down, how good we are at like all of the like logistics around it. We had that business, so that's fine. So we do that. However, the other thing we do, obviously, is like LinkedIn and sort of like, partnerships with, you don't have a lot of opportunities to do partnerships when you're an early stage company. And I think you got to match pretty closely to the group that you can help, right? When I look at all of these platforms out there, I started to say, like, who could we work with? And I started to see a lot of these kind of Clay experts, and some of them, I think probably maybe were like a few years, behind of like where maybe I was at that time. And I started, because I used to use like Google Sheets and Airtable to do the same type of stuff. And I was like, man, this is a group I could really help. And the tool is actually much easier to use, right? So that's what I think. You got to do some partnerships there. But I think it really comes down to like, you got to be just so hyper focused on one group. And for me, it was like, I just built a WhatsApp group, and it's caught some virality. In fact, there are, even SmartLead and, some other companies have said, hey, we've grown significantly. And I just, I'm, humbled when they tell me this. Obviously, maybe they're just telling me what I want to hear, but I don't think that's the case. But basically, like, a lot of these places have, it's this kind of dark social strategy of like going into certain real-time groups, chat groups or whatever. And if right? If the people, if you're in there, you see it every day. I mean, it's a busy place.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like the communities online, if you can find your corner, they're so bad. Like, I think, where I got a lot of my early growth was, one, in your group, but also just on Twitter. Like finding
Twitter was big.
Twitter. Yeah, and kind of look at that's how you found me.
Yep.
And then brought me to the group, and then started posting content in there as well. But I think communities is a very, very, very underrated strategy for a lot of like PLG companies. I think the other thing too is like, a lot, the best thing that could happen is like, you build an integration, or the company, you know, integrates with you that's bigger and they have more of an audience, and then they, you know, push you in the email newsletter. But no, that's not always going to happen, specifically for like newer startups. And so what I think is a smart way to kind of get that integration to go both ways is build it on your end with the expectation of nothing ever happening, and then go reach out to the founder of the other company, say, hey, look, I just built this integration for my customers. Thought it might be useful for you guys as well, and see if you can integrate on your end. Let me know. And I think that works out really well. I think a company that did really well with this is like ListKit, for
Oh
example.
yeah, they're
They
brilliant. They've done a great
built that
job.
integration with Smart Lead, hit up Smart Lead, and guess what? Now they're in the Smart Lead like app. If you go to integrations, they're the first thing there.
Totally.
And you know, Smart Lead being the size of Smart Lead and the traffic that they get, like that's just free publicity for ListKit on the growth side.
Yeah, it's a lot of that, and then like the other thing is that's interesting is like you know, especially in you know, you like, you know, I started to, what I realized was when I was doing the email and I started to build a little bit of credibility in that group, and I had credibility across a lot of different kind of niches against that, right? There was a group that sort of like, you know, had like copy down, right? You know, and I had that group because they really needed to get some content. And I think it, like when I was in you know, when I was in sales earlier in my career, I was like, well, you know, winner takes all kind of mentality. I think what's happened now is I've realized the only competition you're really seeing is yourself, really, in a lot of ways. And if you network very well, right? Like I obviously we got connected, you know, years ago, but like it's just a matter of like, wow, how do we keep this keep these good relationships going? I know you've met, like going to that Smart Lead event and things like that. I mean, that was a good exclusive event. And, you know, I talked to obviously Daniel, and I like anybody else who's in the, you know, in these groups, you kind of know each other, and you're only like one quick message away from somebody. Right. And that's what I tried to build in that SYC is like, I knew, you know, when I see these like pockets of, you know, people that I align with core value, right? Like inside, I could see myself partnering with them in a, you know, I trust them, their business, you know, they're like positive people, they're rational, right? Like they're not like, let's go do this. It's going to, you know, like they have more of that growth mindset, you know,
Yeah.
in business. And I think those are the people that you can really add up. You can exponentially grow by surrounding yourself with people like that. And that's what I've tried to do in the
Yeah.
last year and 2 years, really, more than any time, right?
To kind of pivot a little
Yeah.
bit, you want to kind of tell everyone how you went from, and I'm actually curious on this as well, how you went from like being a sales leader to like kind of really teaching yourself all this, and then teaching yourself how to code, and then building your own SaaS, because you know you're like what I would say is the main developer and like the main leader on the technical side at Lead Magic. But you want to kind of talk about that because I think that's insane. Like, I mean, I think I'm a little bit more techie than most, but I'm still nowhere near the level of like development that you can do. But yeah, do you want to kind of talk about
Yeah, I
that
think for
transition
me,
and
it
why?
was like, you know, I was fortunate. My parents sort of got me into technology early, and I had that, but I never really, I started out like thinking maybe I wanted to go into engineering or computer science. I realized, this isn't really that fun. I'd rather be on the business side, and did information systems. But then I just always was very technical in nature of everything. Like I always like knew ways to solve things with technology, but it was more of a systems level. And I didn't really want to get too deep into the code level insights. And what's changed actually, and this is what I mean, today I was even, you know, now I do want to get into the code side because it's so much easier with the, not that I want to like spend my time all my time coding as a, you know, but I can do a lot. There's a lot of decisions that you can make to just change your company. Like code is a distribution model, right? Like, you know, it's like content and social media, it distributes somewhere. And it's one of them. I mean, you know, you look at any Naval, whatever, you know, and Twitter, right? You look at any of these people and like code can just that's why there's so much there. And the opportunity is huge. It's a literacy thing for the, you know, the upcoming century here, right? So it's like, it's, you have to start thinking of it that way. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in there and be like, you know, the best like coder, but if you can apply the business model to it, and you know, you don't. I always hear salespeople when I was in my career as a sales leader, they always like, "Oh yeah, I'm not tech." Like they would automatically just set themselves up for failure. They would start with words like phrases like, "I'm just not technical," or like non-technical. I'm like, what do you like? That's like saying I don't read. Like I'm not saying like, but you hear that and you're just like, dude, like, what do you mean you're not like what? The world is technology now, and you have to really address that problem head on. Now you can maybe you say I'm not familiar with that topic in technology, but to just sit there and be like, yeah, I'm just not tech. Like, I mean, what are you doing? You're taking an easy way out, right? What if you could go in and learn as much about that as you could? Now, I didn't really love the like hands-on coding, right? Like that is where I got frustrated and it was over my head. And I was like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't get these pointers right, the function. But now all the great code is in GitHub. So you can just assemble code. It's like Legos now. You just do that. You find your great MIT code and you could be a SaaS founder tomorrow. I'm telling you right now, like the code is there, and in 15 minutes, I could build, just about any SaaS you could really want right now. It's pretty impressive what's changed, and even the biggest stuff that's coming right now is like the like the replets and the bolt and continue and cursor, all of those, like those tools have changed the game completely. Because even developers that I know that are really good, I'll talk to them like, you ever use it? And they're, when they use those tools, they're like, holy crap, my job is in trouble, right? So they could get their jobs done a lot faster now if they're smart, and they can go get, maybe build faster and build stuff that people want. So I think it's leveled the playing ground. And I remember when there was like a time when I was in sales at companies and they would say, can't wait till we don't need you guys anymore, right? Right. That was like the mindset of a lot of the engineering teams that I worked with. Right. And I just thought that was such a limited mindset. Right. I was like, what do you mean? What about when we don't need you? Right. Now, I'm not saying it was like us versus them. I'm saying the ones that were really great were the ones that saw the value and realized how hard sales was and how hard marketing was. And my background in sales. Right. So,
Yeah.
but, I understand.
You know what I think is like, and this is like the thing, right? I think like, with the growth of AI, a lot of these jobs are starting to get like the barrier to entry is starting to get a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think like it's so much easier to develop things as like a non-technical person coming in and
Yep.
becoming technical. I think it's much easier to do now. I think where everyone starts to like kind of fall is like, and this just comes from experience. It's like, you have to kind of see a SaaS be made. So you have to kind of see how the front end is assembled and connected to the back end, and then how it's hosted on AWS and then connected to Stripe. Like you find all these like little tiny interchangeable things, and you just got to see it happen once. And then from there, it's like you can figure out how to piece it together with, using Cursor or all these different tools that are on the market that are kind of like level the playing field. But yeah, I think like one conversation I had with Bruce from Cleverly, who we were interviewing last week, was like, I think we're going to see the first $1 billion startup that's run by 1 to 2 people.
Yeah.
Because all that stuff that's happening with AI, and it's crazy to see.
Yeah, it's great. And what I'm doing right now, like I'm like, how fast can I build this app? Like, let me just see if I can do it. And then like 2 hours later, it's like completely built. And I'm just like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And then, whatever you don't have or whatever you even don't understand or how to build it. And that's the biggest thing is like, I also really understand the like IT side of it, the development operations side of it. So like, what a lot of people don't understand is like, all right, so if I run a serverless computer versus a computer with a, serverless computer is something that can run the functions, you pay by the function, right? So what I see is like, I can take advantage of a lot of free tier stuff, right? So, when I look at even when I had no code type stuff out there for sale, now that everything I have is now in code, I'm just like, wow, I can get this cost down to like nothing, like $100, like just, and I'm not doing like I'm not necessarily a great like indie hacker guy that like is going to be at like 50 MRR. I'm probably going to be bored of it in like a week if I'm at, like you see a lot of those, you have respect for them, but you also are like, come on, man, are you really paying the bills with that $50 a month SaaS?
Yeah. Yeah. Just to kind of end off,
Yeah.
to kind of talk a little bit more about Lead Magic. I know we've been rambling for a while. What would you say? Or obviously there's tons of email verification tools
Mhm.
out on the market. Like, how are you thinking about like how to increase your enrichment percentage as well as like the accuracy on it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I'm looking at right now. What we've done is first thing is like I've really figured out so like validating the email first on every email that comes through. And then when something does show up as a catch-all, like what steps can we take to verify that this is actually a real email? So the first thing you got to do is you got to be real about it. You should tell the person what it's an accept all email, right?
Yeah,
Right. And
agreed.
I think my competition does this very poorly. And I would tell them that too, right? Like I have told them that. And I think it's laughable a little bit because that you need to tell people that it's a catch-all email address because it means that it's much harder to verify it, right? And what I mean much harder is it could get deleted this week and you wouldn't know it versus one that isn't like it's just older data. Like you're going to have to use another source, right? You're going to have to figure out a public space where that email address has been used, and you're going to have to basically score on how accurate that address is. And that right there, or you do what you guys even do well with, Scrubby is awesome, but it's a matter of like, do people, depending on the campaign, like, are they willing to wait a few days? But that's the most, I mean, that is the most accurate way to do it. You email them, right? Uh, but you know what I mean? Like, for right now, we're competing in the real time space where people are doing that. We've just really focused on like, hey, these are the best. I'm trying to let them score it. I kind of think of it as 93, performance oil versus like 87. You might not put in your car, right? If you have a fast car. So I think you got to start with the 97, the 93 oil first. You're not going to want to go to that lower, uh, you know, area. And look, one bounce today, like even a soft bounce, right? The soft bounce, people don't understand this. Like a soft bounce is still with Microsoft or Google,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's a hard, like they control every email server, right? So if they're, at the same, it's the same, it's the same. I guess in the older, when there was no Gmail or Microsoft Office, it was like, well, who's really checking this out? But when you bounce, even if it's a soft bounce on Microsoft, I mean, I guess it doesn't alert the whole internet, right? But it still hurts, right? People don't spell emails wrong or they don't miss, not a lot of people send bounce emails all that, right? Like very low
Yeah.
percentage of bounce goes through. And I think, look, if I had to say one agency that I could talk about that has like, I don't even know how you guys do it at your scale. Just like your process must be amazing. Like this is a testimonial for you guys. Like there's nobody better. I can tell you right
I'm
now,
clipping this and I'm putting it on our site.
nobody better than Leadbird in terms of running quality, campaigns. Like it is mind blowing how good your operations is on your agency side. I got to be very real with you. When we were talking about it a couple months back.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Appreciate the love. Well, awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
for coming on. It was fun chiming about all the stuff that's gonna happen in 2025. We're excited to see how the space grows. I want to have you back on in like, probably like
dude,
beginning
I
of
love it.
January.
Yeah, this is great.
Let's figure out and see what our predictions come out to be and then see how it goes.
That's
But
awesome.
outside of that, dude, appreciate you for having me on.
Thank you.